This is Millstone Monday, first Monday of the month. I'm one of your hosts, Mark, and then right over there,
this bearded fella, as you like to say, is Blake.
Yeah, indeed. Hey, so Blake and I, center line. Blake's Fog Firearms. He does our Cerakoting. I know it's been a while, so I feel like I almost need to start off just reminding everybody, what we're trying to do with Millstone Self-Reliance Group and what that is. And we will eventually get back to having these live streams only over on our Millstone channel. But as if you remember, and I'll let Blake kind of talk about this a bunch too. But, just everything got so busy. So you kind of had to shorten up your interior line, so to speak, and make it easier to deal with. Blake, you want to remind everybody what's Millstone, why we're doing it, and then we'll get it. Well, and I'm sorry. And then tonight's subject, this is something that we actually will be training over on Millstone. Tonight, I want to turn this into just more of a fun conversation. We're going to talk about situational awareness to begin with, because I personally think everybody just hears words and they think, oh, that's like making sure you see everything around you. It's a lot more to it. And then that's going to be the preface. And then we're going to get into, should you bug in or should you bug out? Is there even one answer? There is no cookie cutter to this stuff. So Blake, why don't you go ahead and take it away, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the main thrust really of Millstone, and if you've been here with us for a while, you kind of understand where we're coming from, is to better get you and your family prepared in the case of crisis, better orient you for community building skills and things along those values, and better teach you the skills that you need to be able to survive both as a family unit, operate in a defensive fashion, learn how to maintain your equipment, what kind of equipment you maybe need to have on hand, and, how to kind of orient your mind to think about possible scenarios in which you might run into in a crisis situation.
Well, in there, Blake didn't really talk a whole lot about any kinetic, or offensive stuff. We'll do some of that. But, I really, and I'll let Blake kind of address this too, but I really like something that was told to me a long time ago by an individual, I think the premier military unit, in the United States military. We were doing a training gig one time, and we were talking, and his comment to me was, and I already know somebody's going to get freaked out and pissed off, but here's his comment. He goes, it's easy to teach people how to shoot. It's hard to teach people how to think. And I just wanted to bring that up because, it's not my original quote. It was this other gentleman's, but that's like a great thing right there. And I think that's another Millstone. And then, so for tonight, some people might think this is going to be all about plate carriers and CQB and shit like that. And here, I'll let Blake kind of answer that for a little bit, who we are at Millstone and what we're going to be kind of doing here tonight.
Yeah, well, where there's a place for that, it's just another tool in a toolkit. And that's the thing, really, at the end of the day, we have to realize is, we have access to a lot of these different places that we can learn and we can specialize. But we only have so much time in the day. But the biggest thing, the greatest asset that anybody has is what sits between your ears, the gray matter in your skull. So if you can at least start thinking in a critical way, if you can start kind of processing what's going on around you and what would you do in certain situations and how do you utilize the environment and utilize the tools you have at your disposal, you're going to be a lot more effective in a crisis situation than somebody that's just dumped all their time into range time. It's great. There's a time and a place for it. It's a lot of fun. I love to shoot. There's a lot more to look at too. And I think that's really kind of one of the things is a lot of these endeavors kind of set out to be cool guys. And I think, one of our biggest things is check your ego at the door, because we all need to learn a lot of things if we want to be able to pull through a situation that may be or may not be happening. So.
Well, and then once we jump into situational awareness, we'll start off. This wasn't the plan, but, just like there's no plan that survives the first contact, wherever that's supposed to go. But a good plan will keep you in the left and right limits, right? So we didn't really have a plan, but we had a good set of left and right limits. We know what we want to talk about. I'm going to jump it around. I'm just going to do some shout outs real quickly, but then I'll start off the situational awareness by providing an example. Because again, so many people think situational awareness is always like, it's not a surveillance detection route. You're not like, it's being aware of your environment, the situation you find yourself in. And I'll throw myself under the bus here once we start kicking off. And I know Blake will know what I'm talking about once I go there. But here, just real quickly, we got some people in the hizzo already. So thanks for everyone being here. I've got 2 comments that I've got up there. You know, if you guys see them, we're going to be coming back to this when we start talking about the bugging in and bugging out. Where are we now versus where do we want to be? And then how do we get there from here, and what will prevent us from getting there? So that's going to come up when we start doing the bugging in and bugging out conversation. But I just wanted those to be there so everybody could see them. We got Learn Me Something. Good evening. Henner Ben checking in from Minnesota. Snowshoe checking in from Michigan. Gene from across the pond. His name already tells us where he's checking in from, and he's got a big woo, guys. We got G-Dog Hammerspring here. Good evening to you. Haven't seen you here in a little while. Learn Me Something. Reporting from the city where it is not good to expire on a train, as you soon may become a love toy. Man, but see now, so okay, it's a bad joke. A man died, and yeah, and then this horrible crime took place, but see, that's just it. So when we start talking the bugging in and bugging out, is your assessment even realistic? You know, or are you thinking it's going to be immediately like it's everything from Apocalypse Now, you know, Wolverines, zombies, you know, Mad Max, you know, or could it just be, you know, your society is failing all around you and there could be some serious unrest? Gene saying the mind can be the greatest weapon. Amen, brother, it is. And then we got VTech here, VTech Moonwalker. Hey guys, nice to see you making it here tonight. All right, those were our shout outs. So we're going to kind of jump right into the situational awareness and then Learn Me Something. That wasn't meant to be a joke. This city is horrible. Yeah, I know. It's not. It is horrible, and we're going to get to that. And so that's actually a great example. So thanks for bringing that up there, because Blake talks about this quite a bit, and that's where I'll turn it over to him. But first, let's talk the situation awareness. All right, because the bugging in and bugging out, one of the first things, and we teach this in a couple different classes, you know, because it's really important. Well, what is it that you're even preparing for, right? What is it that you think is going to transpire? Do you really think it's going to be Red Dawn and you're going to be running around with your plates, your Mitch helmet, you and, you know, 9 other pipe swingers, and you're going to be like saving the country? Is that what you and look, I'm not dogging it. If you think that's what's going to be happening and that's what you're preparing for, you know, or you think that's like, you know, kind of the worst case scenario, you know, or is it just, you know, inclement weather, a tornado, a hurricane, a fire? Boy, seems to be a lot of fires smoking people in urban areas recently. You know, think Hawaii and Los Angeles, and then they had the other California fires even before these Los Angeles ones. You know, so what is it that's going on? You know, do you live in an area where there's flooding? So all of these scenarios, you know, and we'll get to those a little bit in the bugging in, bugging out section. But I just want to bring these up because your situational awareness, part of that is being aware of all these issues. Like these other things have a higher probability, and maybe the consequence isn't as dangerous, right? Maybe it's a low consequence event, but it's a higher probability event. Blake and I live in northern Minnesota. Blake, is there a chance that there could still be snow yet between now and June?
I have seen snow in May.
Yep. So, okay. So that's a pretty high problem. Now, but even if it happens, it's going to be a low consequence because it's going to disappear really quickly. Blake, next winter season, so winter 25 into winter 26, are we going to have periods of time where it's going to be 20 below zero for more than a day?
Oh, 100%.
100%. So see what I'm just trying to do already right now is situational awareness. So when we start getting into bug in and bug out, you know, and if you're looking on the bug out aspect of it, well, one of the things you have to be situationally aware of, and I would also argue your moon cycles, you know, the time of year, because and you'll see, because all of this, if you start from the head to the toe, all of this is important. You know, if you're, you know, bugging out in the middle of a Minnesota winter, I mean, we're not going to spend this whole time talking about, but you can imagine I'm wearing more. This hoodie is pretty warm, but it ain't that warm, right? You know, so your bug out bag or what you're trying to accomplish becomes so much more difficult at that point. And we'll get into the difficulties, but part of that situational awareness. Okay. So I just mentioned environmental considerations. Hey, I'll throw myself in there. Like I have had, unfortunately, you know, all those cool guy things caught up to me these last couple of years. And I haven't been able to exercise in probably like 4 or 5 years. I mean, like parts of my body. I almost just want to go get my other hip replaced right now just to get it done and over with so I can start the next chapter with 2 good hips. But, back, hips, hearing, all that. Look, when I was a cool guy, I was in like incredible shape. You had to be, right? I mean, that was your job. I sometimes I say near Olympic level athlete. I wasn't training to be an Olympic athlete, but I mean, a 10-mile run, you wouldn't even think twice about that. Running up and down mountains with, your plates and all your, cool guy stuff while people are dropping mortars on you. Yeah, you were doing that kind of shit. And you had to be able to do it, right? Because being slow gets you killed. Right? What do they say, Blake? I don't have to be fast. I just got to be faster than you,
Yep.
But so here's where I'm ending on the situational awareness, not just the environmental, but the personal stuff. That guy, he's still here mentally, but right now, physically, that's not reality, right? So you got to check the ego at the door, like Blake said, and just even start asking yourself, hey, if I'm bugging out, but I'm physically injured, well, where is it that I'm trying to go and how am I going to get there? And what are the obstacles that are going to prevent me from doing it? Well, situational awareness would tell me if it's the middle of wintertime, 20 below, that's going to be a tough walk. It just is. That's going to be some tough shit. And if you're already physically impaired or disabled or on recovery or just getting older, even if you're in good shape, you're not throwing that 80-pound rucksack on your back anymore and doing 12 to 20 miles a day. I mean, it just, and then throw in little ones, or, other family members or whatever it may be. That whole dynamic changes. So situational awareness, and I'm going to shut up and turn it over to Blake. Yes, you don't want to be sitting there just, staring at your phone when the guy, walks up and then just hits you over the head with a stick. That is situational awareness as well. But it's really full cycle, full spectrum, right? The Tooler drill. Everybody talks about the Tooler drill, 21 feet. As I just said, if you're carrying concealed in northern Minnesota, how are you even carrying it? Because you're not fighting through 4 layers of clothes to get at a handgun on your 3 o'clock. Not in the time it can, because a guy can, and I wish we could do it. That Tooler drill, 21 feet, boys and girls. And you, even in rehearsals, it's coming. Depends on your assailant, depends on you. And that's, open carry, knowing you're doing it, and it's a drill. And there's a lot of people who don't get the first shots off before the assailant's on them with the training knife. So 21 feet is nothing, right? It just is. So Blake, I'll shut up right there and go. You see where I'm kind of going on, where the situational awareness is so much more than just, oh, am I paying attention to my environment? It's yes. Are you paying attention to all of your environment?
Well, and are you predicting your future environment and your future needs? Because that absolutely is part of it as well, is trying to forecast what's going to happen. So take your example of trying to bug out in the middle of winter time. Depending on your environment, you're increasing your weight significantly just in the clothing that you need to survive. You're also cutting your time and traveling down significantly. So all of these variables need to be accounted for. Depending on distance, do you have caches that are set up ahead of time? I mean, because if you're serious about it,
don't go down that road yet. We'll get there when we actually talk about the bugging in, bugging out. Let's just stay right now on the like what you're doing right there, the situational awareness of how are you going to get there?
And that's the big thing, is you have to try to be able to predict. Well, you're trying to out predict life, and that's kind of one of those impossible sort of things. We can't get things perfect, but we can get things close. And the better that we plan for things, the better that we are organized, the better that we try to predict outcomes. And, we can see these alternative pathways. We can see these alternative things. So in essence, that's what keeps us alive throughout history. And it's what can keep you alive in one of these situations that can be anything from a natural disaster to what we just saw in Spain last week, which was a nationwide power outage for over 24 hours, left people stranded on public transportation, left people without being able to get water into their homes, left people stranded in elevators. So, what happens if you are riding a subway home, or, you're going somewhere in public transportation and it all shuts down? And I just saw that some people were stranded longer because some of the power cables were actually stolen, so they couldn't get the trains back up and running again. So when things like this happen, and it seems like in the last half decade, we've seen more and more of these sorts of things happening, it seems like the worst comes out in humanity. All right. And there's going to be certain elements of society that will always exploit and take advantage of these situations. And you have to be prepared for it. And like you'd mentioned, are you bugging out with more than yourself? Is it family? Is it elderly family? Is it young family? There's just a tremendous amount of variables. And it's one of those things that you can continue guessing for the rest of your life on it, but having a series of plans and at least something, a semblance of a plan, is going to be significantly better than just kind of winging it.
And bringing it back into the situational awareness. So I'm going to add just a little bit of an ingredient into the pastry we're making. I'm going to turn it back over to Blake. But, you know, and because Blake and I even joked about this, and we've joked about this many times in the past. We probably really should do it in earnest, but you know, because I'm not afraid to say it, I'll say it out loud. Hey, look, if I'm looking at the news and it looks like something really bad is going to happen, I don't know if we just lost Blake or if he'll come back. Let me get that a little bit, not on me as much. That was a little bit too much, Mark, even for me right there. I got to keep an eye on my phone here real quickly. I don't know if we just lost Blake or he'll come back in here, but so where I'm going with that though is, as Blake was just kind of talking about, you know, I'm okay with the social embarrassment of here he comes back in here.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. And I was just saying, you know, and I'm bringing it back over to you. I kind of stalled for a second, but you know, I'm okay with that social embarrassment if I'm paying attention. And again, I'm practicing situational awareness, just even in the larger, grander scheme of things, whether the weather's getting shitty or it looks like there's going to be, think about it. We all do this. You already do it. So why not apply it to other things? You know, hey, we're going to get a blizzard this weekend. I should probably make sure I've got plenty of food and water, or, you know, a plan to keep the car, you know, going, or, you know, that's when it's a blizzard, it's really tough to shovel. So I'm going to have, you know, like you already are formulating a plan if you didn't already have a plan based on your experiences going through this, you know. So again, whatever your concentric ring, so think the Tueler drill, but, you know, that's a personal defense, 21 feet. My argument is that it needs to be much larger than that. And especially because of environmental concerns. And you are, you know, more than likely you're starting on your back heel, right? The other person's initiating. So you're already reacting, so that you need more time to react and get ahead of the power curve. But it's the same thing. If something looks like it's really bad, that's going to go down. Do you have you thought that through, done your rehearsals, and have your, okay, in this case, I am going to bug out, right? And again, I'm not saying there's one way or the other. All we're trying to do is get you to think of, like, which one do you think more applies to you? And have you thought through all the consequences or the considerations of bugging in or bugging out? But if I was going to be bugging out to Blake, and I just said, like, look, I'm not caring. I can't even, you know, this thing, when it's full, you know, our little ruck, when it's full, you know, and I've got a bunch of gear in there, it's, you know, and mothers and stuff on the outside, it's about 30 pounds. I technically can't carry that right now. Now, if my life was on the line, I would do it, but that's even above my weight restrictions right now. So I've got to give myself even more situational awareness, more concentric circles. I might say, hey, this isn't looking good. Hey, Blake, mind if I come out and just crash out there with you guys for a couple days? You know, you see where I'm going with this, Blake? Yeah. And then, you know, worst case scenario, you know, I've got to buy the pizza because, like, oh, Mark freaked out again and, you know, and came out and lived with us for 2 days. But what if something would have happened? So you see what I'm saying? So that's just one more little aspect of your situational awareness that you can start developing and thinking through and planning through it, even right here and right now. Better to be a little embarrassed, because again, I'm not going to be able to walk to Blake's house, whether it's summertime or wintertime. I'm going to need to rely on modern mechanized travel to get there. Right. And so if I push my first ring of security farther back, or I give myself a different type of tripwire, and I already have these things thought through. And again, I'm not coming out there and, you know, moving the whole shop out there. I'm coming out there with what I think would be my no shit items for bugging out that I can carry in a vehicle. And if the vehicle broke down on the way to getting to Blake, I would then be, you know, taking that gear and refining it down, maybe into a platform or two, and then all the way down to just what's carried on my body. Now that's jumping ahead a little bit, but I just wanted to talk about that tripwire and situational awareness, Blake? Because you and I have talked about that before.
Well, and it takes into consideration, like you had mentioned before, physical limitation and environmental limitations. So what you're doing is you're expanding your order of thinking. Okay, what are other things that need to be in consideration? Like you said, worst case scenario, you come out and you spend a long weekend and, oh, okay, I thought things were worse than they are. I'm going to head back home. Best case scenario in a worse situation is, okay, something did just happen and now you've bought yourself 12 days of travel time or something along those lines. So again, I think it's cost risk analysis for sure. But I definitely think it's a good way to look at things.
Yeah. And I hope people are picking up again, because you can apply that thought process, that mindset to so many facets. And matter of fact, and you should be applying it to if you even already decided that you're bugging in. I mean, you still have to then have that situational awareness to look at, okay, well, what would bugging in look like then? Like, again, when and maybe this is a segue. Maybe I'll just tell this little story and then we'll see if this is a segue into the bugging in, bugging out. But somebody I knew, and I may have told the story in a live once before. I'm not picking on them, but here's the other aspect. You've decided you're going to bug in, but you don't have the situational awareness to you haven't thought through what that's going to look like. It's now day 5. You live south of a major metropolitan urban area. You're south of that, not too far off the beaten path from like a major, freeway interstate. And you've got a farm, but you're a country girl, right? You grew up tough. You're tough. Day 5, day 3, you start seeing refugees walking down the road because they're not all out in the main road, right? And at first it's 20, and then, end of the day, it's maybe up to 100. And then the next day or the day after, it's 300 to 500 people walking down your road who haven't had any water, any food. Maybe they were, when they got caught with their pants down, both literally and figuratively. And they're wearing like office shoes and, they don't have any gear whatsoever because they didn't have any of that stuff on them or in their vehicle or whatever the scenario is, right? We all know what I'm talking about. There's going to be a shit ton of people who have that mindset and who will be thinking that everything needs to be provided for them or the government needs to give it to them. But now there's day 5 and they haven't really had much to eat. Maybe, hardly anything to drink, or except maybe mud puddles are out of the ditches, whatever's going on. There may be have been physical issues that are already taking place. Again, we don't know what the scenario is. It could just be a natural disaster, like on a massive scale. Like think of like the what was that explosion in Russia at the turn of the 20th century, the Tunguska?
Well, the Tunguska event. Yeah.
They don't know what did that. That could have been a meteor, but like had that been over in an urban area, you would have had refugees. It would have destroyed a major city, killed tons of people. There would have been displacement, and could be potentially a natural event. So I'm just trying to say, if you didn't put on your situational awareness hat and you're not even giving yourself, again, you didn't check your ego at the door and you're like, I'm tough and I'll be able to handle it. And now it's day 5 and there's 300 people walking, down the end of the road, end of your driveway, and they see your farm. They see you've got horses, whatever. You don't think there's going to be people, and it's you and your girl. That's it. That's what you got. Hey, great. You'll probably will defend yourself a little bit, but somebody else out there probably has a gun, and these people are hungry. They're crazy. Yeah. It's survival. So if you didn't think that through situationally wise, situational awareness wise, in your bugging in plans, you're also making another mistake. That's what I just kind of wanted to bring up there. Go ahead, Blake.
Well, I mean, speaking to like the refugee crisis, we've seen it both domestically here. I mean, Katrina is one of the most vivid examples I can remember in my lifetime, where things kind of just completely came unglued in a localized area because of refugee movement and things along those lines. We've seen it a lot overseas as well. And I think the thing that people really have to keep in mind is, although we are a higher base animal, we have intelligence and I would agree we have a soul, and there's that aspect of it. When crisis happens, we revert to a base function, and people are very, very much so either protect your family or protect themselves and do their whatever they need to get their own. So when you're viewing humanity when they're in a civilization and everything's running along pretty well, you can look at them with one set of eyes. still cautious in a lot of ways, but okay, there's at least a bit of a social contract. But when that social contract's truly and null and void and it's off the table, man's capable of some pretty dark things, and every single person is capable of it. So something to keep in mind, and that's why it's just a numbers game.
And also, if you don't mind, and is it because it's a combination, it's a mathematical formula, but it's a combination of time and external pressures, so for some people that could be like almost instantaneously they flip. Other people, maybe it's they make it, other people are already mentally, inclined in that direction. And so it's not going to be a switch. It's going to be an opportunity, and they're just going to go into their natural way of things.
So, predicting the human element is a very hard thing to do, but it is something that goes right along with the situational awareness and with the thought of both bugging in and bugging out. And I think one thing we haven't really touched on yet is, what is the goal of bugging out? Like explicitly, and typically it's you're getting to another place. We had joked around a little beforehand is, if you're bugging out indefinitely, well, then you're a road warrior and it's Mad Max out there and things have just completely fallen apart, and that's a different rule set. So the whole goal of bugging out is to getting to another stable location where you can, in essence, defend yourself, defend your loved ones, and try to flourish. And I mean, really, if we boil it down, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you're already going that direction, but I did want to do one comment, read a comment and then but yeah, let's just make the transition and let's give the definitions, what we mean when we say bugging in, bugging out. But a couple of things real quickly. Quest Views, Blackbeard, greatest strategy out there. This is a strategy for success right here. He's going to wear Eva foam flip-flops with cheap white cotton tube socks, sweatpants, and a hoodie, and walk around like he's in a daze. In other words, he'll become invisible. Quite possibly. Good point.
Urban camouflage at its finest.
Good point. Good point. All right, now, okay, as we start getting in the bugging in, bugging out, I just, look, you guys don't have to do anything if you're watching this live, but if you're watching live, I'm just kind of curious. I'd love to see comments right now. If your plan, like if you even have a plan, maybe say, maybe my plan is, I don't know how I can predict this, so I might bug in and I might have to bug out, right? Because that's quite honestly, that's kind of the realistic approach, unless you have a crystal ball and you know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, bugging out could be just simply another way of saying, I have to get back home. I'm at work, and, yeah. So tell us what you think in the comments. Are you going to bug in? Are you going to bug out? Just a little informal poll. We'll just see what people come up with. You don't have to explain yourself, just a bug in, bug out, or a combination of both. And then Blake, let's go ahead and use that time. And let's just kind of define that, because we just did. Is it really bugging out if you were at the office and you work 30 miles away from home and there's been a coronal mass ejection, not through military, right? But just a solar, man, we miss solar flares. Again, what was that? The Carrington event or whatever that, just thinking about that.
One of the more famous ones.
Yep. So, I mean, this stuff happens. This is real. Nature gets a say in things. So it could be, nefarious, we're at war, or it could just be, hey, nature just wants to remind you that you guys are little ants, walking around on her planet type of thing,
And this is kind of anecdotal to the grand scale in which you're referring to right now. But in the last, 4 weeks, I've had a fox on property that's taken several of my chickens, and I had to kill my rooster because it did glorious battle with it 3 times. I had a bear on property that's been just young and hungry, and I don't know what he's after. I don't know if it's my chickens or what. And then I've got carpenter ants in the house I'm trying to deal with right now. So, that's 3 things in a month where it's like, hey, here we are at this threshold of society, this level of technology, and yet it's still a constant battle against nature, even at this tier. So, that might not be a coronal mass ejection that causes massive issues, but it's still an issue that has to be addressed.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so we kind of got, I don't want to say sidetracked, but I'm actually trying to think. So we actually covered this in that, and again, and we'll kind of save this to the end if it comes up, about some of the classes and how we're doing this. But one we've taught before, called the first 72 hours. And so, an answer to this, is, and we've got G Dog Hammerspring saying if for his location, he's bugging in. No other comments from anybody else yet. I don't know if people are just waiting to see what everyone else says, but in that first 72 hours, as we just kind of defined here. So again, in the definition, you're bugging out. Look, if the event happens, whatever that event is, again, you're asking yourself, where am I and where do I want to be? Right. These are where am I? Where do I want to be? How am I going to get there? And what are the things that are going to be obstacles or barriers or going to, work against me to get there? Okay. I just named one for me. I'm not carrying 60 pounds and walking 20 miles a day. Right. So some issues. So the office might be me bugging in because it's safer to stay here during this period of time and wait for society to catch up and, to be some semblance of EMS or something out there where, I might be able to get a ride home. Or, again, you've got a bicycle or you are in better shape and you're like, man, I could do 30 miles in a day. I know I could, right? Because, I'm in shape, and in shape people are harder to kill. And, running's not for everybody. But if you really think about it, if you walk 4 miles an hour, you can do 12 miles in 3 hours and then take a break, right? So there's 24 hours in a day. See what I'm kind of getting at? You could accomplish that if you had and did some of that training, had some of that physical capability, but if you've got the wrong shoes and if you've never done it, you don't know how to do foot maintenance. See how so many issues start coming into what's even in your kit, right? Because if you're thinking that, hey, I have to be prepared to walk that 30 miles from work to my house, and are you gonna jog it? You could do that, like with a light rucksack, maybe 20 pounds and, a good pair of running shoes because you're a big runner, or you got a good pair of boots in the vehicle and you got a foot maintenance kit. But see where I'm already trying to get at is but bugging in doesn't necessarily mean your house. It could be where do you want to be? Well, I want to be at the safest place possible. My house would be the safest place, but I'm never going to be able to manage this. I'm 60 miles away or 30 miles away. I'm not going to be able to get there. I'm actually safer trying to rally these people around me, and we stay here and have a go of it. Blake, thoughts on that? You want to add to that takeaway? What do you think?
I think, for me, the big takeaway there is how situational it can be. One, depending on what it is that's actually happened. Let's say you're in an earthquake situation at the office and you're stuck there. You got to get out of the building, get away from the catastrophe zone and find safety there. Maybe it's a coronal mass ejection, like you said, power's out. You're 60 miles away again, but the building is in, decent structure. You're safe there. And again, it's so situational, and very environmental. And I think you have to make that decision in the moment, but having some preparedness for those different contingencies is a wise idea. I know for me personally, if we're talking about like on the home front, I'm going to be here because I got a family and trying to move a bunch of family stuff, kids and wife and get somewhere, there's a few places a fella can go. And that's kind of one of those decisions you got to make at that time. But to me, it is one of those things that's very situational. And that's why it needs to be tailored to everybody's individual needs. It's not something you can just go take our 5-hour class on bugging in and bugging out and you'll be a master that can teach it. That's not how things work. That's not how the real world is. But again, going all the way back to what we were talking about, starting to think about things, developing new neural pathways, thinking of how to do this stuff, it's going to allow you to better prepare for these different inevitabilities.
And it doesn't make you a weirdo. You're not, like they've worked so hard to attach negative language to being prepared or being a father or caring about your society or caring about, your family, that has got such a negative connotation. People roll their eyes. Oh my God, what are you going to pray next? Yeah, maybe I am, where did this go wrong? So whoever you are watching this, don't let the idiots and the evil people around you drag you down, man. And look, in the best case scenario is none of this ever happens. Best case scenario, none of this ever happens. And then you know what? Then you might be out some money for some gear, but you've been using that gear to go out and hunt and fish and camp and spend time with your families, be in nature, strengthening this. and working on your skill sets. So if it ever did happen, Blake, I know I've said this to you before. I won't say who it is of my friends, but they know, who you are. But, when I first left the agency, and everybody was kind of talking about these things because I had put together the class, the first 72 hours, And some folks had said, well, we're just going to come up to your place. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're not coming up to my place. You haven't prepared anything. You don't have weapons. You don't have, skills. Like, what are you going to do? And everybody was like, I can't believe Mark just said that. But I was, being honest, honest in that way that friends love each other and say, you've got to do a lot for yourself. The answer isn't coming up to me. What do you think I am? You think I'm like a Pez dispenser with I wish I had enough gear and ammo and everything for a small army. I don't, unfortunately. The founding fathers would be pretty upset with me, to tell the truth, Blake.
Or I got to punch them numbers up.
Yeah, seriously. But so, yeah. So, and again, just in that thought, and I know we're kind of on a little bit of a tangent, but be an asset. Don't be an ass hat, be an asset, right? So whether you're bugging in or bugging out, there's still a ton of things that you can do. And, and again, if I had a different little metric up here, I'd show the military way of looking at, individual tasks, collective tasks, and, hey, this one task is used in 10 different things. So if we only have a little bit of time, let's train that one task because that task is critical to all the other larger things that we do. And I guess that's kind of what we're, ultimately pushing here on the bug in versus bug out. There's a lot of overlap. You still have to be physically fit to be bugging in, and we got some people talking about, bugging in. Well, here, I'll just do it real quickly. G-Dog Hammer Spring, his location, bugging in. Gene, he's only going to bug out if civil unrest or fire or flood, forces him to do it. He's saying bugging in is safer for him at this time. Snowshoe, same thing. He's bugging in if possible, and he's going to fight his way home from work. So again, that could be a very distinct possibility, because you work every day because you are a hardworking man. Okay. So when we get to it, your vehicle, rucksack, person, however you want to look at it. There's a bunch of different ways. Henner Ben, she's thinking about bugging in, even in a car, doesn't mean she's safe, right? Try to join friend one and, link up with friend one so you can have a better chance. And then everybody gets to friend two and then to friend three and just keep building that as you go. That's a damn good point right there. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that actually brings up the point about, really, to me at least, the quote unquote, if we want to use the terminology we are of the night, is bugging in, is that's really where the community growing happens. Is, ultimately, if you're planning on staying in a location in a crisis situation, your goal there is not to just be able to survive, but in the long run is to still be able to thrive, to actually grow and start producing more of what you need. And I think that's where, the exciting stuff for me comes in. It's your gardening, it's your hunting, it's your building up a piece of property, building up more structures, more capabilities, creating that network of individuals that can augment your skills. So, really, again, it comes back to, these are just steps to get you into a state of safety. Then at that point, you can't do it alone. You need to look to other people in a community, pull together, and actually kind of weather a storm. So, really the bug in, bug out, the whole argument is the first 72 hours, like Mark says, in the class. It's what are these initial crisis situations while things are in turmoil and in flux, and you have to dictate where you're going, what you're doing, and then plan accordingly. So anyway, sorry, I've also got a dog that's being a total pain in the butt while we're talking tonight.
But there's your situational awareness. Because if you're bugging out, are you leaving your dog behind? Are you, is your dog coming with? If you're bugging in, there's all kinds of, very positive things about animals, both everything from the emotional side, which could be very important in a crisis, to the early warning, as far as like an animal, even if it's just that fox coming back trying to get at the chicken coop,
I was just going to say,
many positives. Yeah.
Heiko let me know every night that bear was on property within 5 minutes of it being here. So just a lot of things to think of. And there is no one checklist, in my opinion, humble opinion. Now, I do want to give
before we kind of get into it, because now we're going to kind of talk a little bit more. We're already at 40 minutes. Look, here's the thing, and we're just having a conversation right now. This isn't easily one of those 2 to 3 hour conversations. And then if you start actually training and doing lists and breaking things down by, again, whatever you want to do, 4 food groups, shoot, move, communicate, medicate, 10 C's, get home, however you want to look at that acronym, once you start applying that situational awareness of like, okay, well, what is the environment in which I'm bugging in or I'm bugging out? Like Snowshoe Dave's talking about, he's going to bug in if possible, but he's already thinking, hey, I might have to get my ass home from work. So right there, your mental attitude, your situational awareness has to expand, because you're thinking about what to do to maintain the bugging in property and that posture, that safety posture, and your survival posture. And as Blake said, not just your survival, but your thrive posture here. But then you're going to have to be looking at, well, what's the situational awareness, the environmental considerations? I'm trying to get from work to home. How far is that? We've already kind of talked about this stuff, but it's the stuff, it's not as sexy as like, well, I'm just going to do CQB, because it's too true. Like, when was the last time you foot marched? Maybe you've got a bad back, or, or again, it's 20 below outside, like, have you thought through what that scenario is even going to look like? And then have you then planned it through and rehearsed it a little bit? And then that's maybe where I'll kind of come over here, because, in your bug out, I personally think, and we can do the concentric rings or the Tooler drill, that, situational awareness, because the more time, the more distance you have, and distance could be measured in days. That's time. Those things provide more opportunities, more availability, right? If I can do it in my vehicle, I can carry a whole hell of a lot in my vehicle. My vehicle is both offensive in nature, it's defensive in nature. I can carry a whole hell of a lot more. It can be in, a shelter. I mean, it is you're bugging in. I'm bugging into my car as long as I can, until I get to a point. And then I'll bug out of my car. And then to me, it starts funneling down. Then you're looking at travel light, freeze at night, because again, are you there to get into a gunfight? Are you there to get home to save your family and be there with your family? Is your goal, you're one person, are you going to be walking around, with your M4 and your plate carrier? Like, have you ever done 20 miles with plates on, in your weapon? Have you ever, and that's a serious question. I'm not picking on anybody. Have you ever even done anything like that? And for real, not some ego well, I was at the range once. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Up hills, down hills, crossing rivers, streams, mud, all that shit, and all of that rolling gear on you. And then you're going to throw an 80-pound rucksack on top of that. And maybe we can just start right there, because that's one of the things of the bugging out that always bugs me.
Yep. Because honestly, if I was in that, let's say I was that guy, and I am not that guy, but I decided I am that guy, and I'm going to wear all that stuff, and I'm going to bug out. Honestly, I'm just a walking loot chest. Like, someone's going to look at me like, man, there's a lot of nice gear there. I think he'd be a good one to shoot. I mean, it's life's not a video game, and you need to understand what your limits are. And again, it comes back to checking your ego at the door. Like, and the other thing we talked about beforehand, before we started the live stream, it's, what about consumables? All right. So how much food are you taking in? All right. How can you replace that while you're doing that? How much liquid are you taking in? Can you replace that while you're doing it? So it's not like you fill your gear or your bag with all this great gear that has an indefinite shelf life and can be used infinitely. In fact, there's very few things on earth that are like that, especially without maintenance. So again, more considerations to take in while you are figuring out what you're going to do. And I think that in a realistic situation, you're probably most likely going to be running into people bugging out if they are caught at work or something along those lines, where it's in their daily activities, they're away from their home base, they got to get back to it, and I think that's one of the ones that at the very least, if you take anything away from the night, I would say that's the one you really do need to think about is, okay, in the interim, if I'm out operating in my daily life, I'm going to Walmart, because Walmart's 35 miles away, 40 miles away. Okay, well, what if something happens, or I'm going to work and it's 25 miles or 50 miles, it's irrelevant. Is how do you get from point A to point B, wherever your final location is, and what are the ones that you could actually run into in your real life environment?
And yeah, and do you have this, not only the gear, having the gear is nice, but if you've got this, again, everybody just calls it the bright shiny. I'm pretty sure that was a military thing, which we probably took from kids, just like whoobies, that's a child's blanket, right? But the bright shiny thing, hey, this is the bright shiny thing, but if you don't know how to use it, it's worthless, right? So you still have to have the training, the rehearsals, the mindset, the knowledge. Some things are easier to master than others, but if you leave your ego at the door and approach it, as as cold and callous as you possibly can I really make that distance? And if for you the answer is like, so just back to one of your snares, Blake, because I think one of the things we're missing is, depending on the situation, if it's a nuclear war, there's probably not a lot of people bugging out from the city because they're incinerated. But if it's some other type of event, most of those people in the city are going to bug out, to use that term incorrectly. They're going to become refugees at some point in time, because, if there's no electricity, they're not walking the 100 stairs up to their house. Maybe they are, but and what is that going to look like? But it isn't going to take much in the urban environment. And I think we all know, we've all seen it. It isn't going to take long. That shit's going to go up like a match, like a killer. To
use your example there too, are they going to walk up that 100 stairs 7 times a day with 5-gallon buckets of water so that their plumbing still works, and generator fuel and this and that and the other? Like,
and where are they even getting?
Where are they getting it? Yeah. Exactly. So that's one of the things that has to be considered, is eventually these complex systems, if they're running into this sort of thing, these complex systems will break down. And it's only a matter of time, sometimes a very short period of time, before people revert back to that base instinct like we were talking about earlier. And that's the biggest wild card in everything. But in the same breath is predictable, because you can count your number on it that if things go bad, people are going to get worse.
Yeah. Well, everything's going to get worse, because if you're caught out of pocket and you didn't have some, like broken in boots, your hunting boots, boots, you can do 10, 20 miles. And if you don't have that in your car and you're stuck in your, because you're a big shot, kind of guy, and you got your really nice, like leather soled dress shoes, you ain't walking 2 miles in a day in those things. You'd be better off just taking those off, throwing away, and wrapping, extra socks or
tying t-shirts onto your feet.
Yeah, seriously, at that point, right? So, now, I don't know if we want to go down some of the show and tell, but, we're at almost 50 minutes. And I think, we're kind of getting the point across, but to maybe just use one last little portion here, and we don't necessarily have to show gear. But again, I think my argument would be is your vehicle is your vehicle and your homestead are, really like some of your most critical pieces of infrastructure that you're looking at, because your bugging out might just simply be, better term, trying to get home, right? It is what you're doing. And you have to abandon your vehicle, but you have enough stuff in your vehicle and you can carry stuff and you've trained with it, you know how to use it. And then depending on what the scenario is that's causing you to have to abandon your vehicle, you can make more informed decisions about what you're going to carry. And look, you guys, you all know it. There's already somebody who's watching this like, I'm going to carry way more weight. He's just a pussy and he's old now. I guarantee you there's somebody thinking that, and you've never carried 60 pounds on your back on concrete before or through the woods. And it's going to smoke you, man. And then you might become a heat casualty, depending on where you live, the time of year. That even in wintertime, that's one of the most common things in wintertime, being stupid. And you got all your gear on while you're carrying, and you're sweating too much. So, really vehicle, because it can carry a lot. And until that vehicle is immobilized, disabled, or whatever, runs out of gas, or, it's an EMP and it doesn't work anymore. But then, the gear that even then it's still a bugging in. You might stay in your vehicle for a night or two as you're getting all your shit together. And, because you did, I don't know, whatever, it's the middle of the night, and why start off in the middle of the night? I don't know what your logic, again, the scenarios are many, but you might still stay in the vehicle for a night. You might try to figure out what other types of things you can scavenge from the vehicle, because now suddenly in your decision-making process, you're like, hey man, this was this type of event. I know how to do this one thing, so I'm going to make sure I bring a wrench and a screwdriver with me. I'm seriously making that up. But on that note, maybe one of the things you should have in your car is a Leatherman, right? You don't have to necessarily have this on your person at all times, but once you leave your vehicle, this is going to be on my person. And I don't know if we'll go into that type of list, because again, everybody's different, but some things are going to be on my person and never leave my person. Other things can be in my ruck or my chest rig, or, you know, whatever my rolling gear is, you know, but you might end up having to abandon that, because again, you're looking more about speed. That, I guess that's where I'm kind of going. You know, I've got a bunch of little pieces of gear. Only one or two of these pieces of gear is frivolous. But it's only frivolous. Like, again, if I was trying to make it to Blake's and I'm on a bike, and I've figured it out, you know, and there's some good bike trails that are off the beaten path. You know, now I'm on a bike, I can carry a little bit more weight. I might carry a jet boil with me. See, there's just so much. And somebody said, well, why not just make your own fire? Well, what do you guys think? Do you want to be outside, out in the hinters, you know, by yourself? Maybe you've got a handgun, maybe you don't, right? You know, it depends on your scenario and everything. Are you going to be wanting to be cooking a fire and having a big fire every night? You know, it might be more important for you to have like an emergency blanket and a jungle hammock, or a jungle. I've got one from Snug Pack, but they're just like little bivy bags, you know, they're super light things, you know, because you could always throw grass and leaves in that to add extra insulation. You know, it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to work, and, you know, have to know how to do it. But by day 2 of a 4-day trip, you know, I might at that point in time really need some nutrients. You know, these heat up super quickly, you know, not a lot of, I mean, there would be smell because of the food and everything, but whether that's a brew up with some coffee or bouillon, or just one meal in that whole thing, you know? So, and if that's the case, well, in your vehicle or your kit, do you have some other form of protein? You know, do you have Jeremy and I were talking about this, for laughing our ass off for like 4 hours the other night, because no one ever thinks about boo-boos, or you know, their hygiene, you know, your teeth, you know, infections. No one thinks about water or electrolytes. You know, it's just like, oh, I'm just going to drink water. Like, oh man, see all that sweat that's all over your clothes because you've just been doing 20 plus miles a day. You've got to get some of that shit back in you. You need some salt, you need some electrolytes, you know. So even just thinking about that, how much of that are you even going to carry? Are you going to carry, like, you know, not picking on snowshoe, but maybe in snowshoe scenario, it's only 20 miles from work to home. Snowshoe isn't going to be worried about a jet boil. Well, unless it's 40, you know, snowshoe, the name implies. Maybe he would in the wintertime. But, you know, then it changes again, because your situational awareness is there, and it's even changing what you're putting in your vehicle, what's going in your ruck, or what might be collapsing down onto your body with your rolling gear.
For sure. Yeah, I was gonna say no. I think it's definitely a very strong consideration. Is how can you augment that, and how can you travel? I think you touched on a bicycle, and honestly, I think a bicycle is one of those forms of communication that everybody should have, or communication, transportation rather, that everybody should have access to. You can carry a lot of weight. It is relatively a limited amount of calories for output for mileage. You can keep yourself pretty hydrated and do that while you're still moving. You know, so that's definitely one of those things that I personally really like when considering, you know, having to bug out, as it were, is a bicycle is a great option. And to the point of jet boil, they can be a little bit loud, but, you know, again, when you need calories and you don't want to start a fire, because a fire is a big, hey, look at me, I'm over here sort of signal thing. Again,
and don't forget, your environmental considerations, because maybe it's been raining or you live in a rainy place, and making a fire, you know, do you have dry tinder even, you know, can you even do it? How much energy are you going to expend just even getting your fire going? So, you know, or do you have in your vehicle a homemade, pre-made fire starting kit? This is multiple fires, all the tinder, super easy. But now it's a little bit of weight, and it's a little bit of a cubes, right? So is this gonna, see, this is why there's no cookie cutter. Some people might opt for this. Others might just say, hey, my environment is, you know, whatever. but you're right. You know, it is going to be possibly 3 or 4 days to get there. I can go that long without food, but it's going to be a morale thing. I'm going to be burning lots of calories. I'm definitely going to want to do some bullion, or maybe even just a motivation, you know, some caffeine, because maybe I need the caffeine because, you know, I've got to be a little bit more on my guard because, you know, there's dangers out there, whatever it is. So I just think, you know, again, though, one of the goals, and I've got a bunch of stuff just to, well, here, I'm just going to do this. Well, do you want to add something real quickly? And I'm just going to show the stuff, not really make too much of a comment about it.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, that's just the thing. Like you said, there's an infinite number of gear. And I just saw someone here in the chat said, you know, always talking about trying to layer gear, smaller bags in areas, something you can slip into your belt, you know, having redundant systems, and also identifying what it is that you really, really need. You know, is there something that's so important that you want to even carry a second or a third copy of it? And is it something you can get away with as far as a weight classification and that kind of thing goes? So, you know, having layers is really a great way to kind of approach a problem as well, because again, in that operation, in that moving from point A to point B, you can't predict the events that can happen in between there. And, you know, that might be that one thing. Like, one of the things I carry with me pretty much everywhere. It's like in my wallet. I've got some in my pockets that are wrapped up. I've got some in my vehicles. I've got them in my shop and everywhere. Razor blades, just a razor blade. It's amazing what someone can actually do with a razor blade. So, you know, is there something small like that well, maybe it does make the difference between life and death?
Well, and again, it can fit inside of an, you know, again, multifaceted, can fit inside of a different tin, a different type of container. Hey, so on that note, okay, so let's actually do, because there were some great comments. Thanks, guys, for throwing some good comments.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
AVV, you know, again, ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain. Yeah, I know he knows what he's talking about. That's infantry talk right there. VTech Moonwalker hurt his shoulder at work. That's why he carries a sling pack while he's hiking. He's definitely not bugging out with weight. Yeah, so that's just it. And I think that's actually one of my comments right there before I continue is in my humble opinion, bugging out isn't about weight. Bugging out is about speed. It's about stealth. It's about your best, because you probably are alone. Your best survival technique is to not get into contact. It's to practice good noise and light discipline. It's to get off the beaten path and close the distance as fast as you can so you can link up with your allies, your clan, you know, your people, and have a better chance of surviving.
And you hit it on the head there too, and doing that quietly. Because the last thing you want to do is go rip roaring like hell anywhere you got to go, and then, you know, you're, hey, here's my people. What's up? I'm here. Oh, don't mind the 15 barbarians that followed me home.
Yeah. Yep. Situational awareness. Hey, somebody's following me. Maybe I don't want to go to where the cache site is. See, and here's the deal. We didn't even talk about caches. There's so much to cover in these subjects. You know, that's why I personally like them. That's why, you know, we as a group, just, these are fun conversations to have. It's so nuanced. We didn't even talk about caches. And, you know, for VTech, or for like me, if I was making my way to Blake's, to maintain that speed, to maintain that, you know, limited amount of gear, just my rolling gear, and we'll get into the layers, G-Dog, hammer spring. That's what you kind of already were talking about. But that's one of the points. I'm going to want caches. And it's going to be caches of mission critical items. It might be, you know, food, more important, you know, like, you know, are you really going to be, you know, again, are you carrying enough ammo to, you know, do your own Alamo? Is that your goal? You know, like, you know, I got yelled at once in my previous job because everybody wanted to have these tricked out AKs for something we were doing. And I'm like, we all got 9mm. Let's just do MP5s. Cause, you know, it's this, you know, 9mm. We don't have to have multiple
cross compatibility.
Yeah. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, if we're just going to spray the engine block, we're not here to get into a fight. There's not enough of us. I'm going to put something into the engine block, break contact, you know, maybe even throw a smoke grenade on them or some shit, you know, but that would be American, you know, thing to do. But, you know, maybe moon them as you're driving away with their engine block.
With the middle finger out, right?
Yeah. But, you know, but that was my whole thing where like everybody was like, well, I'm going to fight my way all the way back. I'm like, oh, how about we avoid that? You know, so that's speed.
I was just going to say that the best fights are the ones you avoid.
Yep. All right. Then Gene was saying you'd commented a while ago about a bike and a trailer. Yep, exactly. And just good options. So would even be a push cart. There's all kinds of cool push carts that, are off-roading.
Shoot, in a bad situation, just a grocery cart.
Yeah.
Well,
but then you're going to be limited, good roads, urban sidewalks,
Agreed, but depending on your circumstances, just to kind of go back to what Blackbeard was saying, so dress like that zombie in the city, grab a cart and throw some cans on it, and you're gonna just look like a homeless guy. I mean, again, it's that situational awareness, right? What are you doing?
Well, and then I think, here for my part, a good place to end. G-Dog, Hammerspring, Blake, I think you saw this. But yeah, layering, that's what we're really talking about. Is there's stuff that can be in your vehicle, but once you have to leave your vehicle, you've got to make some critical decisions on what's going to be in your rucksack and how much weight that is. Again, I'm trying to make the argument that you want, because if you're carrying 80 pounds, you're slow, you're an easy target. You're going to be using more potentially. I guess somebody could say, would you really use more calories than as if you just had VTech, like a sling pack and a good pair of shoes and you actually tried to jog? Which one would really, I don't know the answer to that, but then have some electrolytes or have some, power bars or, like protein bars or something like that and be prepared for that. Because again, to G-Dog Hammerspring, that is exactly what I'm saying is you've got to be prepared for all of that shit to be gone. And all you have is what's on your body that, so again, they always laugh at people who have like pants with tons of pockets or shirts. And it's like, there's a reason, man, or like the little, the little paracord bracelets. Well, there's one thing that's just right there on your wrist and it could do a whole bunch of stuff, especially if it was survival cord, right? But again, are you going to be taking the time to stop and try to fish for a day or make a fire? Or are you just going to wrap up in your whoopee and throw a bunch of leaves and stuff in there, suck it up and then get up and move again because the moon is going to be full and you'll have a good illumination and you can make a lot of distance, that night, or it's waning. And so that means the moon's not going to come up until midnight. So you just sleep during the still latter part of the day where it's still kind of warm. Moon rises at midnight then, and then you just go until sunrise, and then, hunker down, again, if you're worried about being observed. And hunkering down and sleeping in the daylight is a lot easier than hunkering down and sleeping in the darkness. I know that sounds weird, but go do it with just the stuff you're wearing and find out which one is a more pleasurable time to be,
I would say you can get up in the middle of the night and, when you're moving, you're creating heat. In the middle of the day and you're sleeping, there's heat to be had. That's a big switch right there.
Yeah, no. And daytime, it's easier for people to observe, so, and if you're in that type of situation, maybe you don't want to be doing it because you didn't plan properly and you're not on a hiking trail or a bike trail that's not going to be very frequented. Instead, you're on the main hardball, getting out of town or heading towards, east, west, or north, south, whatever it is, right? There's alternate routes, but that's your situational awareness. Again, you have to be situationally aware of, well, how would I even get there? Again, are you going to drive? Okay. And if you drive, and then if the car dies or if no car, what are your other routes, your other options? And can you make those decisions in the middle of your movement? Have you thought about it enough where it's like you can call on audible? We just ran out of gas. I'm just going to make this up. I'm 10 miles north of North Branch, Minnesota. Let's say I'm leaving the cities. I'm north of North Branch. Okay. Well, I know there's an east-west or a north-south to the west of me. And there's that weird road that kind of comes in from Wisconsin, but that's about 20 miles away. I'm going to go 5 miles cross country and I should be able to pick up that north-south hardball because that parallels the Mississippi and there's going to be a bike path someplace. See what I'm getting at? And you can make those decisions as you're on the go.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I don't know if we want to talk about anything else. Again, I did have a whole bunch of little proppies things set up. I guess maybe, I agree with G-Dog Hammerspring. You got to be looking at it in in a breakdown, top to bottom, layers. Actually, that's a great way of saying it, G-Dog. Yeah, you're layering it. Your vehicle's one of the layers. Then what's on your body, your rucksack, maybe your platform, maybe your chest rig. I'm not wearing plates. You go do you. I mean, we're talking about moving quickly here. right? So, but then all of that that rolling gear might come off and you're just running with what you got in your actual pocket. So that's where all of these things have to be thought of in advance and come up in advance. Do you just have a small little fire kit because you're not really thinking about making a fire? Well, and if you're not thinking about making the fire, do you just have some hand warmers for your hands or on your kidneys? Or do you've got a full on fire kit, right? So these are just examples. It's the same thing with like what's on your person. Do you do like this is Jack's flashlight from Black Scout Survival, or do you do a really small thin one? You know, what is it that you think you're going to need? Do you carry an aspeton? You know, like, I mean, look, you're going to have some type of cutting tool or some tool, right? So a tool, or is this better? You know, like, so you're going to have to figure this out. Do you have just a small thing of your meds? So you always got 4 days of your no shit meds on you? Or do you just think it's going to be really bad and you carry a tourniquet pressure dressing? Or do you have one of our med kits and it's got a lot of like, this could be your field hygiene, your foot hygiene, your personal hygiene, and some boo-boo stuff in here, and maybe some lickies and chewies. Like, you know, because this thing isn't coming off my body. This would be one of the things that once I have to exit the vehicle, this kit is going to be on my body, right? And that's going to have my most important stuff. And then again, everything. I highly encourage everybody. I'm going to pull it up real quickly. This is my last thing. Jack, as you guys all know, I do business with Jack over at Black Scout Survival. Love working with him. I don't know. I guess everybody's kind of maybe thinking about this. He did a video a couple days ago, and let me see here. Yeah. Okay. I think I got to do it this way. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. It's been a day, you know, since we've done this, you know, so there it is. I just was on the wrong thing. So Jack did a video. I guess I'll just let me just see how we're looking here real quickly. Okay. Jack did a video last week and it's his bug out bag. Now he's got his own bug out bag that he just manufactured. This is the intro. I just want to get to the title kind of screen. You know, again, so he's giving you some scenarios, some thoughts. What is it that you think you're going to be dealing with? What's the issue at hand?
As promised.
Okay, here we go. This, so I might have to, let me see. Will it mini player? There. Can you guys, let me come back over here. Yeah, now you can see it. Black Scout Survival. It's the Bug Out Bag 2025. And it's got, you know, Jack he's doing a little bit more of talking about specific pieces of gear. I mean, I think that's the main difference between what we've done tonight, Blake, and what Jack did a couple days ago. But clearly people are thinking about it and talking about it. And I think Jack just did a really good job on that video. So if you guys get the chance, go over to Black Scout Survival. It's on Twitter too, if you don't want to do ScrewTube, and watch that video. He goes down a whole bunch of different items. There was one item in there I'd never seen before. And thanks for spending my money, Jack, the money I don't have, because I'm like, that definitely would go in my kit, right? It's a really cool battery pack unit. You got to see it. And I'd never heard of it before, but it looks pretty damn good. So that's got a bunch more of very specific kind of, and again, we've barely touched on everything and we've been here for an hour, but you know, your food, what are you doing for food? You know, your medicine, antibiotics, your hydration, you know, if you're going for, you know, if you're running a bottle and a cup, okay, well, this works now with fire. For me, if I have to worry about boiling, disinfecting, you know, that's fire. Whereas a Grail, if I'm just worried about drinking, well, there it is right there. I can use this and, you know, fill it and drink. Now, I personally like the Katadine because if I'm going for speed, it's the same thing. But I don't have to squeeze it and get dirty. I can just, you know, put this in the water and I can be drinking while I'm on the go, right? So all of those things are different options. And then there's the gear that we make, because if you are just thinking about like, okay, well, what's the stuff on my body? Okay, this, you know, the canteen cup can do all these other things except filter on the go, but there's other little Sawyer bags and things like that. But it also then has all these other pockets, attachment points, and storage. There's a ton of all of this gear right here that you can have on this. That's just over your shoulder, right? Part of your rolling gear. So it doesn't have to be my gear. Go watch Jack's video, get a sense, because again, you could argue about flashlights, medical stuff. That's what we were trying to do tonight, is to get you to start thinking about your own situational awareness and which one of these environments and what does that look like and how is that going to impact, well, what am I really trying to accomplish and how am I going to do it? And then gear is going to be a part of that, but you got to train with it and you got to work this thing. That's what I got. No,
I was going to say, I don't think you could have put a nicer bow on the end. This is your biggest asset. It's your biggest tool. It's the most important thing to focus in on, because once you start to exercise that, you can actually start to explore the different things that could potentially happen and how you're going to react to them. So, like we said all the way back at the beginning, it's going to be a kind of a reoccurring theme when we're talking about stuff. Let's check that ego at the door. And that goes just as much for us as it does for all of you. If you really want to learn, you really want to try to make something better every single day, try to learn a new skill, improve something. That's pretty much the first step right there. So I look forward to seeing where obviously we go with all of this. I love seeing the comments, guys. Thanks for the interaction tonight and being able to kind of actually make this a conversation, because this is more a community than it is anything else. And we really want to try to make sure that we can help enrich each other when it comes along these lines. So.
And Blake and I have kind of talked about this. We don't really know what our game plan is, but we are moving forward with Millstone, and actually doing physical training this year. Matter of fact, I don't want to jinx anything, but Blake's got a meeting. What is that, tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow I'll be meeting with Gary over at the shooting range.
We're doing that. But in the meantime, what I'd also, as we kind of wrap this up, in the comments of the video itself, whether you watch us on demand or if you're here with us live, go back out and leave a comment. Because we're even thinking of, instead of so this is fun, right? To me, this is a lot of fun having this interaction, but we could take 2, 3, or 4 people and actually do this and made this into a class, and whether it was, and focused on that, answer questions, so just stay tuned. I don't know if we're going to kick that off really soon, but that's something that we could do right now without having to have the physical portion of it, still as being finalized. There's still things that we could do right now, and stay tuned. Cousin husband had told me a couple weeks ago that he's like, dude, you need to get your own Amazon thing. And I didn't know that was even a thing, or I guess I had kind of heard about those in the past, but I didn't know that was a thing. And I guess that you can do it, because if you look at all the loadout videos that we've done, the loadout videos with Gimli, loadout videos with Valley Reb, look at Jack's loadout video. Again, there's some good gear in there. And if there's a way we could help capture that and hey, because again, you don't have to buy it. And we're not necessarily espousing something, but there's definitely some things that I do espouse more than others. And I've got the Carver Matrix up here, but that could be another class on just how do you even go about figuring out if you want to have here. This was going to be a part of it. So when you're bugging out, and if you're going for speed and you're taking stuff out of your car, are you going for a larger saw and a shovel? What does this do compared to a smaller saw and a hatchet? Well, your environment, and there's so many, one of these tools might work better for this than the other tool does. And there's ways you could measure that and then say, look, and some of it could just be like, I've never used a shovel before. I don't know how to use that tool. I'm not being flippant, again, whatever it is, if you've never started a fire before and you don't even know what a ferro rod is, but it isn't hard to figure that out, but kind of along those lines. Do you have a Mora knife that's got a ferro rod in it? Do you have a much larger, robust knife that with your own fire kit on the outside that can carry easy? And there's a lot more than this can do than the Mora, but they're still good knives. Or do you just even have a small folder? Again, it's going to be different for every person, but watch Jack's video. I really liked it because it should get you thinking a little bit more about the individual kit. Wrapping it up again last time, our goal is to just get you to start thinking about this and what that looks like and how that means, for you in the big picture. But the individual stuff, I think Jack did a really good job in his loadout video. So go check that out. All right, Blake, that's all I got, man. We're at 1:15. How you doing?
Perfect. I'm doing wonderful, but I've got apparently a fussy baby. I got to get picked up from the grandparents, and I'm sitting out front right now. So,
all right. Hey, well, if you want, I guess I haven't used this in a while because there were some comments I missed. Should we let's just blaze through the comments and we'll wrap it up. How about that? All right.
Sounds great.
AVV. There's not much point in humping things outside of your skill set when bugging out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. How do you work it? I have no idea. Well, then why are you carrying it? Husky Bunch. Yeah, try to catch the BSS. Husky Bunch. AVV saying it was through BSS that he ran into, found us. Yeah, but okay, but both guys, yeah, you're right. But go check out that video of Jack's if you didn't get a chance to see it. I think that adds, I think that this video and that video would play very nicely together. Husky Bunch, and then Gene saying you never stop learning. Learn me something. Talking to AVV. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess a bunch of you guys found me through Black Scout Survival. Well, thank you, Jack and Black Scout, and thanks for you guys for finding me somehow. And then, yeah, and then learn me something. It's good to see you. We actually talked about you not so long ago, AVV. We're like, man, we haven't seen him in a while. I hope he's okay. Snowshoe, Amazon influencer page. I'm gonna look into that. Again,
affiliate linking is the term you're going to want to use.
Yeah, I know it can be done. And again, and I've had people like, hey, what was it that, Gimli said, I don't want to go back and watch it again, like, so I think having that, there, especially, if there's a way where like, hey, I actually own 4 of these, or I've owned one of these for 20 years and it's never broken, or I'm on my 10th one of those and I'm not buying it again, but they are popular. Like, I don't know if there's a way to do that. And I don't know if my opinion even really matters. You guys might be like, I don't give a shit what Mark thinks. He's bald, so, whatever. G-Dog Hammerspring, good job, guys. Outstanding, thought-provoking video. Thank you, G-Dog. And then learn me something. Loved the video. All right, Blake, take us on out. Let's wrap it up. I know you got shit to do, my good man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think ultimately at the end of the day, guys, we're never going to be fully prepared for an outcome, but we can be better prepared for potentially all the outcomes. Keep thinking, keep moving, as Mark likes to say.
Never quit.
Never quit. But at the end, also check that ego and be honest with yourself where your limitations are, what the limitations are that are maybe outside of your control as well, and plan accordingly. And, not saying it's going to happen, but maybe there will be a zombie apocalypse. And if that's the case, hopefully they're nice and slow and fun to shoot. So. Yeah. Not that
rage virus.
Not the rage virus zombies.
Yeah, if that's the case, man, I think your best course of action is just grab your holy book and a bottle and go watch the sunset.
Rage virus zombies are too much. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here with myself and Blake here tonight. Stay tuned. We got more coming out, and there's more videos coming out over on Centerline for the gear, but we're going to be doing more of this type of content. Like I said, if you would like to or are interested in, hey guys, yeah, I would love to have that as just a very private conversation, with 2-4 other people. Ping us, because we're already thinking about, okay, well, that's another thing that we can do. So there are ways that technology is good, and this is one of them. We can still work with each other. We can still share things, and we can still help each other grow our own communities wherever we are.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on that note, God bless. Thanks, everybody. Hope everybody enjoys their Cinco de Mayo. You don't drink and drive. And, well, if you drink, have somebody else drive or whatever. And then let's all wish Blake a good night. He's got a fussy kid, so he was able to put up with us and go a little bit longer. So thanks to the grandparents and
absolutely. And it was a blast, you guys. Thanks, everyone, for showing up.
You got it. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. And you know the deal. First Monday of the month, Millstone Mondays. We'll see you. That's our next live stream. But stay tuned, because we're doing all kinds of stuff, as you saw. So we might have another live between then, but we'll definitely have some more of this content. And let us know what you think in the comments below. All right, everybody. Really appreciate it. Everybody, God bless. Be good. Keep thinking. Keep moving. Never quit. We'll talk to you guys again soon. All right, everybody. Woo!